Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bill Amirault, and I want to welcome you to Career Clarity and Purpose in this live event, which is also being recorded on Zoom. My panel of 14 experts will reveal their strategies for creating career clarity that's aligned with your true purpose. If your life was influenced by COVID and your career as well, and I don't know anybody who didn't have some impact on one or the other, but you're downsized, right size, reorg, let go, rift, or any other separation that wasn't what you were looking for, maybe you've experienced those and are looking for something else that you may want to do, or you've had a part in the Great Resignation and you said to yourself, hey, I've been doing this a while, I don't want to do it any longer, or wherever you are in your career development, this whole day has been geared toward that. And my guest now, Alan Kirshner, will speak, from his perspective as to how that has both impacted him and how he's added value to his clients. Alan has been a career coach that we've met at several networking meetings in New Jersey. He also has an extensive background in finance and budget analyst type roles. And he's worked with pharmaceutical industry and financial services. And we didn't know it, but we were both at Shearing Plow back in the late 80s and early 90s. But that now is part of Merck anyway. So Alan, welcome. Thanks for taking the time this afternoon to speak to our audience here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. Really appreciate you inviting me. I feel honored to be here, and thanks for putting this together. It's a great opportunity for people to hear a lot of different perspectives, and it's really nice to be here. So just wanted to give a little bit of a idea about my background. Bill went into it a little bit.
Which is what the first question was, exactly that, your background and how it's dovetailed into what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I guess I've been on a couple of the calls today. So similar to what Alex Freund was talking about, I guess I'll go back a little ways to how I started, because I didn't start out in career coaching, as Bill kind of hinted about already. So right. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics, and my first job that I had was at General Electric Corporation in their major appliance division as a credit representative.
Louisville.
So, yeah, actually, our office was in Englewood Cliffs at the time, but eventually it went to Louisville, but they were based out of Louisville, the corporate office.
Right.
So I worked there for a period of time, and I decided I wanted to get more into finance. So I started going for an MBA at night while I was working at General Electric. Mm-hmm. And then I've had a number of pivots in my career. So the first pivot that happened was GE decided to close our location down in New Jersey and move it to Georgia. And I ended up not going along with that. So I ended up leaving GE and went to work at RCA mm-hmm. in telecommunications. So I pivoted out of consumer into telecom, doing a similar type of role, but I had my eye on wanting to get into finance more heavily. So I was continuing with my MBA, and an opportunity presented itself at RCA to get into finance. So I was able to make that transition into finance.
So when you say the opportunity presented itself, sometimes people understate what that really is. Somebody recognized that you could do what this position, required, and you had, quote unquote, earned the respect of whoever it is that reached out to you. I'm making that assumption. Would that be an accurate way of saying it?
Well, it was really part of my planning, because RCA had an office in Manhattan also, and they were going to be closing that, consolidating it down to the location where I was at. Mm-hmm. And so I knew there were going to be financial jobs that were going to open up. So that was part of the reason I took the opportunity at RCA. I see. So I was planning and looking to make that transition. So, the opportunity presented itself because of that transition, out of that location. And, I was able to prove myself in the job I was in at RCA, and then was able to pivot and move into another opportunity that was more heavily into finance, which is what I was looking to do.
Right. And when you got into that position at RCA, then what was the outcome at that point?
Well, the outcome was I continued on with the MBA. I got my experience in finance, and then interestingly, when you talk about transitions, about I think it was about maybe 6 or 8 months after I started at RCA, they were bought by GE.
Yes, ironically, yes, I remember that.
So I left GE and then I was back at GE. And then again, due to mergers and acquisitions and transitions, then GE bought RCA basically because they owned NBC at the time. So
Right.
that was the main reason they wanted to buy RCA. So there were multiple divisions. I was in a communications division. So they eventually decided to divest that, and they were moving those positions. They were our organization was bought by MCI. So I'm dating myself here because some of these companies no longer
That's okay.
exist.
That's
But-
okay. And they also wanted the 30 Rock too, which was still part of the program. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, they were moving the jobs somewhere else, and I decided that it wasn't the best career move for me to stay with that new organization. So I interviewed around and I moved into, and I was ready for a new opportunity and to get into management. So I interviewed around and I got into telecom as a manager, like my first managerial role. It was at Belcor.
This is after your MBA, though, correct?
Yeah, I had finished up the MBA at that point.
Okay.
So I was interviewing during the time when I took the position at Belcor, and I had also interviewed in pharma, and I had interviewed at Shearing Plow, and I was interested in making a pivot into pharma. That was one of the things that I was looking at doing too. So I interviewed at Shearing, ended up coming up the runner-up for a position in their pharmaceutical division. And so I ended up taking the job at Belcor. So I was there about 18 months, and lo and behold, the person who got the job at Shearing didn't work out. So the position was open again. And so I interviewed a second time for the position, and this time I got the position. So I ended up making the move into pharma. And I guess, people talk about it's difficult to get into, an industry that you don't have experience in, but I was able to pivot based on my functional experience to get into pharma. And so
were you in K15 in Kenilworth, or where were you? What building were you in?
I was in originally this K6 building, and then they built the K15.
Right.
And so then we eventually moved into that building.
So I was on the second floor of K6 for the time I was there before moving out to Liberty Corner. We're totally sidebarring here, but just there is some overlap. We breathe the same oxygen and use probably the same restroom every so often, but that's another conversation. But the big thing here is that you're building, brick by brick and floor by floor, you're building a career story, both with the accounting job you first got out of college after an economics degree, and also the ones you've just described, and while you're getting your MBA. So you're building a framework here by which you can have a healthy platform to get promoted. And you mentioned you just got into management. So the pivots here are all, I'll call them, upward mobility pivots as opposed to shifting. And I'll get to the shifting part here in a minute, which is what I really wanted to get to, is like, how did you get from where you are in the finance world into where you are right now? And it looks like there are two pivots when I look at your background.
Yeah. So I guess there's one more pivot after this one. So
okay, go ahead. Yeah,
I'll get to that. So I was at Shearing for 7 years, and then another restructuring occurred. So you can hear kind of a theme here that there were multiple restructurings or reorganizations in my career at pretty much every step of the way. And my position was eliminated. And so I went through outplacement at the time, and I was actually fortunate. I was looking around for another opportunity as well. So I was able to land after 5 weeks after I was let go, and I was let go like right around Halloween time. So it was, typically not the best time to be looking for a job. Right. But since I had the pharma experience, and I was able to move into pharma at Bristol Myers Squibb. So I was doing, kind of a similar functional role, and they had also had a transition where they were moving software platforms. And so it was an opportunity to get in and to learn a new software platform, with the background that I had.
In SAP, correct? Or
Yeah.
no?
Yeah,
Okay.
in SAP.
Right.
So I kind of got in at the ground floor with SAP, learned a new skill that was very marketable also. And I had a 18-year career at Bristol Myers. I moved into two other functional areas over time. And again, I guess partially was a need for pivoting, because the original group that I went in got outsourced at a certain point in time, but I was ahead of the curve with that one. And I moved into another organization. The guy that hired me into Bristol Myers he was there about a year, and then he moved to a different department and for a promotion. And so I kept in touch with him, and then an opportunity opened up in his organization. So he already knew me, and he was either fortunate or foolish to hire me the second time, but I got into his group there. And so I was in that role for a good period of my career there. And then another pivot time occurred because the company decided they were going to move some of the functional areas out of our location in New Jersey and open up a center in Florida.
Ah, okay.
And so that was another opportunity. But luckily in that situation, I was ahead of the curve again, because I had developed quite a good network over time, having been with the company a long time. And I was able to use that network. Actually, somebody that I had met on a vacation that we didn't realize at the time, initially, that we worked in the same company. So after the vacation, we got to know each other, went out to lunch and things. And then when this other transition occurred, I spoke to her, and she had an opportunity in her organization. So I was able to move into her group. And all the different areas that I had been in previous to this were all sort of more considered back office type of roles.
Okay.
And so they were kind of the ones, that would go quicker when there were reorganizations or restructuring or moving things. So the last role that I had at Bristol Myers was actually being embedded in an R&D organization. And so I thought that was a good move, because one, they had just restructured when I came into the group. And two, I figured, R&D is the lifeblood of pharma, and it would be an opportunity. I thought there would be a good amount of stability in that area. So that's what I thought, but life doesn't always work out the way you think it's going to.
Right.
So I guess about a year into that role, they reorganized. They brought somebody new into our department from the outside, and that person decided that the reorganization from a year ago wasn't the appropriate reorganization. So they had to decide on their own reorganization. So there was another situation where they restructured jobs, and I was one of a number of people in the group whose jobs got eliminated. So it was a 6-week notification between being notified and when the position was ending. So I used my network again and did a little bit of interviewing around, and nothing really came of it. So I ended up, with my age and the years of service I had, I was able to go out as a retiree from the company.
Wow. Okay.
And
so two things here. Number one, kind of sidewinded into the pharma industry, but once you were in it long enough to get a retirement package out of Bristol Myers. Did that include outplacement, or was it just a retirement package? Well, how did that get structured?
Yeah, it was a nice severance package, and it was also outplacement with Lee Hecht Harrison. I think one of the other people had mentioned they had gone through Lee Hecht too. Maybe it was you or one of your other speakers.
Actually, it was me, but it wasn't me who mentioned it. I did go through Lee Hecht Harrison back in 2003, and that's another story. But yeah, go ahead. So, a couple of key takeaways from this is be flexible enough to pivot, but have a plan in mind that you can execute against. And all these corporate restructures you have no control over, which is, the one thing when I'm working with clients, that they feel helpless is too strong a word, but they do absolutely feel a lack of control or a lack of influence even on what their career outcomes are. And I'll say, well, this is the reason why, you need to be prepared for this if you're working for somebody, and if you're working for yourself as well. I mean, what pivots do you need to make? How do you need to shift to make it so that you can meet your income goals? You can meet whatever other metrics that you're pushing out there. And, of course, all these people who are doing the reorgs have the metrics they have to work against, which are
Right.
P&L, and, completely understood. I mean, I had P&L responsibility, I don't know, 7 or 8 times in my career, where I was responsible for the top line, managing the middle line, and then giving the bottom line back to the corporation. Gross profit, obviously. I didn't have to deal with all of the other stuff that went in underneath that. I didn't pay for lights or buildings, but I was allocated that. So I know where this is, specifically since we were both at Shearing Plow, and they went through the merger and the Merck thing, which was a nightmare. I knew people that were still at Shearing before that. So let me see if I can get
Yeah, that's Natasha.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Okay, she's now on mute after whatever reprimand she was providing. So
Hopefully it
yeah, so
wasn't for me.
again, well, no, as long as it wasn't for us, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So again, lessons learned. You've gone through the pivot points, lessons learned, and the real pivot here, at least for me, and you can describe.
You're on. Or get back. So for once again, that's it. You're don't have really pick away. Make my day. Everything's gonna be okay. What you say?
Bill, you're frozen. I can't hear you.
All right, Alan, my device went down, so sorry about that. I'm still on the call. I'm now on my phone and I'm waiting for my laptop to come back on. So continue on. It was like right in the middle of a good answer here. So
Okay. All right. So now we're getting to the final pivot. How did I guess this answers your question. How did I get into career coaching?
right.
So when I went through outplacement, this was an opportunity for me to look at what do I want to do next?
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a different, position financially to think about what I was able to do. So I explored and went down a number of different avenues, including doing what I had done previously or pivoting and looking at doing something different. So one of the things that I had always gravitated toward was helping people with their job search and resumes and their performance reviews and things like that. So I had this idea that, that might be something I'd like to do. So I worked with a career coach at Lee Hecht Harrison and decided I wanted to give the career coaching a go. So how did I get into it? Not having any, real experience, not having any training or anything in it. I was able to start working on a volunteer basis. So there were a couple of different volunteer organizations that I got involved in. One was to do volunteer career coaching for an organization called the New Start Career Network that was affiliated with Rutgers University. And so I started doing that and taking on clients. And I also got involved in a job seeker support group, got on the executive board there on the PSG of Mercer County. So those were the things I started to do. I also did a lot of inquiry and talked to people that were transitioning into career coaching to see how they did it and what needed to be done. So
Okay.
I got a lot of knowledge and understanding from people that were doing it, and most of the people I found out, didn't start out as a career coach. They came from all different avenues, be it learning and development, or a lot of times marketing, some of the other coaches that I've become friendly with over time. So I started doing it on a trial basis because I had a severance that I was working off too. So I didn't have to urgently get a job immediately. And I felt like I really love doing this. I'm very passionate about it. So that's what I started doing, opened up my own company, and I also work supporting an outplacement company as well too.
Got it. And, you and I had a conversation about this as you were getting started. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was more, hold on. Okay. Okay, now, Alan, I got to pin you back here again because I don't have you. There we go. Okay, we're back. We're good.
Okay, you can hear me again?
Yes, my laptop came back. I don't know why it went down in the first place, but it's coming back, so we're good.
Yeah, sometimes that happens with technology, so we gotta be flexible and roll with the punches.
Well, this is why I had the other device ready to go. So exactly.
Good strategy.
So yeah, you continue. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you were mentioning, we had talked early on. So part of my learning about being a career coach was going to job seeker support groups when I was in transition myself the last time after I left Bristol Myers Squibb. So I met multiple coaches, Bill being one of them, and picked their brains a lot and said, hey, how did you do this? What's your background? What are the key things to do? So there's a lot of learning you can do by talking to other people. So I think that's one of the key points I'd like to leave people with, that you can learn a lot from other people. You don't have to reinvent the wheel or figure everything out yourself. There are people that are doing what you want to do, and you can talk to them. And that's the whole idea of developing a network and using that network. So I have a huge network now of career coaches, and we help each other out. We give each other advice. We support each other with, attending meetings or doing presentations at different groups and things like that. So it's, you can develop a network into something that you want to do. And also, if you have the opportunity to be a volunteer and try something out and test it out to see whether it's what you expected, what you like, and what you're passionate about, that's a great way to get into something too, where you're making a very significant pivot.
Yeah, understood. And you have obviously significant both industry and functional area experience. And the next question is that where your client focus is, or, who's your avatar, your target audience at this point?
I get, I would say a significant amount of people that see me on LinkedIn and like my background, either the pharma or the accounting and financial areas. So I think they gravitate toward me as a result of my experience.
Right.
But I've coached people in all different areas. I know when I was doing some of my work with the outplacement company, they had a big hospitality client that was, during COVID, hospitality got, hit really hard, and a lot of people were out of jobs. So I worked with people in hospitality that did all variety of things, from being a pastry chef to being somebody in housekeeping to being a general manager, people in sales and marketing. So the sweet spot, I think, people find me for the things that they see that I have expertise in, but the pivoting, you can be flexible and you can get clients in all different varieties of industries and functional roles too.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the process of it is pretty consistent. It's what yours or mine or Alex's or Ed's or Lynn's, or, you know, what's your specific spin on it? And I have found that, you know, situations like, you know, we're on, you know, been on this call all day and learned something from every person that I've spoken with. You know, I'll say to clients, I say, look, I have a lot of answers, but I don't have all of them. And if I don't have them, I'm going to tell you, and then we're going to figure out where to find it. And a lot of times it goes back to, you know, the network you're saying of career coaches that you've worked with. And sometimes I've referred people to others who I know would be better able to serve what they need at that particular time. And
Yeah.
you know, other times I'll just say, okay, let's do it. And then we go from there. So, you know, you've talked about your pivots, and I think I counted 4 big ones and 1 minor one. So, you know, from the time you finished college, you've worked with, I'm going to say, hundreds of people in the last 5 years or so, 5.5 or so, doing this. How did you support those who were either looking for permission or trying to figure out what's next in their life or their career because they were unhappy with what their career circumstances were at that time? And that could be because they were doing the thing that just didn't line up with them and they've been doing it for a long time or even a short period of time, or they were just in a bad environment, you know, toxic environment, bad boss, whatever it might be. And just how did you go through the process? When, you know, a couple examples of those would be great.
Yeah, I would say what I would do for any of the clients that come to me that are thinking about potentially doing a pivot is look at a few different things. One would be, what are you passionate about? What do you love
Right.
to do? What are things that really, you know, get you going? And it doesn't feel like, you know, it's a job. You would just continue doing it. What do you look at the current job you're in or the past job that you had? What did you really like about that role? And what were things that you didn't like about that role? Another thing would be, what do people say about you? You know, what do they say are your strengths? Because sometimes, you know, we think something and other people look at us differently. So go back, talk to, you know, managers, talk to people who've worked with you, look at your reviews and stuff and see what people are saying about you as far as what your interests are. And
Right.
I think also you have to kind of look at things the way I view it with my clients is looking at it holistically. Like, what is your situation now? What are the finances that you need?
Sure.
What's your circumstance with your family? Are you geographically flexible or not? So I think you have to take everything into account and look at everything to decide what you want to do and where you are in your career. You know, I am very candid with my clients and say, you know, if they're in transition and they're looking for things, you know, probably the quickest thing you can do is do what you've done in the past, but do it somewhere else. And
Right.
preferably, you know, the easiest thing would be doing it for a competitor in that same industry. You know,
Yeah.
the next level would be doing it in another industry. And then, you know, if you want to completely pivot and re-career, then we have to look at what do you need to get to that point?
Right.
Is there additional training? Do you have to go back and get a degree? Like one of the things I was thinking about when I looked at doing something with coaching was going to work in higher education in like a career development office.
Right.
So I talked to 2 people in my alumni career office who had actually pivoted into that and said, how do I get there? How did you do this?
Yes.
And each one went back and got a master's degree in counseling.
Right.
That's the way we were able to get into this. So I looked at that, thought about it, said, you know, that's kind of a 5-year commitment for me, you know, to get the degree. I needed to get a certain amount of hours, supervised hours, in order to be able to go into that. So I felt like at this stage of my career, that's not something that's really a good option. So I explored that, but then I put that away and said, no, that's not the way I'm going to go.
Right.
So you have to think about it really holistically. And I think, you know, it's good to brainstorm a lot, especially, you know, if you're in a situation where you can do that. You know, if you have a spouse that's working or has the medical benefits covered, then you have more of an option. Maybe
Sure.
your options are a little bit more open than if, you're the sole breadwinner and you have two kids in college right now,
Well,
and, you need to get something right away. So it's,
well,
it depends on your circumstance.
right. As you're saying this, and this is a conversation that comes up all the time with clients, particularly ones in, say, their 20s or 30s, and I'm just using this as an example, but do I get an MBA? And my answer, I did that. I quit my sales engineer position at General Electric in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and went to grad school in Bloomington for 2 years. Best move I made in my life, literally. But I gave up a salary that was more than what both my parents were earning together at that time. I'm the oldest of six, so it was like a big decision. I was like, wow, do I give this up? Well, by the time I finished grad school, I had an internship with Pillsbury up in Minneapolis. By the way, Minnesota in the summers is beautiful if you can deal with mosquitoes that have, the teeth like this. But I almost doubled my salary when I came out. All right, when I started working at Procter & Gamble in their brand management program. So from a investment return perspective, it was almost a no-brainer at that point in my career. But what you're describing is it worth the time, money, energy, and effort to get this credential? How's it going to move the needle in terms of my ability to earn an income doing this particular role? And there are certifications, and I don't have to tell you any of that. There's certifications you can come by that aren't the full, going back for a master's degree in counseling. Because I see these types of positions posted all the time. My daughter and son who live in Austin, Dad, why don't you come work for UT? I was, well, if they get me front row basketball seats. But at the end of the day, these are all trade-offs. And the way you're saying about looking at it holistically is exactly right. I mean, career is a subset of life, and you have to measure your whole life objectives and put career in as a big subset, and then manage it accordingly. And, some of the things you're saying about talking to people before you make a move, 100%, measure twice, cut once.
Absolutely.
Along those lines. So if you could, just a couple examples of clients that you've worked with that you've helped through those pivots or through those transition periods, and your strategy, your approach that resulted in some successful outcomes, to use a pharmaceutical industry term.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give you two examples that are not pharmaceutical related.
That's okay.
Both of my people were from the hospitality work that I was doing. So each one was in a sales role, and after all the layoffs with COVID, they felt like they wanted to pivot out of hospitality because of the fact that they felt like it wasn't as stable, especially with what was going on with COVID. When is it going to be opening up again? Mm-hmm. And so we worked together, and they really loved doing sales, and so it wasn't an issue where they wanted to become an HR rep or an accountant or something. They wanted to do sales. So we worked on their resume and, kind of beefing up their accomplishments, and each one of them ended up landing a sales role that was outside of hospitality.
Nice. Okay.
And interestingly, and actually, I can now think of a third person who was in that same circumstance too, that I worked with, that landed a role outside of sales. The first two people that I'm describing worked for maybe 6 months or 8 months in another industry.
Right.
And realized that they really missed hospitality. And so both of them went back as things opened up more in the industry again. One went back to their exact job.
Wow. Okay.
And the other one went back to a similar job. But it's interesting how, you always think, things are going to be better somewhere else, or the grass is greener on the other side. But in both of these cases, they tried something else and realized there was something about hospitality that they liked, the customer service aspect of it, and dealing with clients. And their organization, was one that treated employees very well. So they left with a good feeling. It was just because if it wasn't because of COVID, they wouldn't have left, and they wouldn't have needed to pivot and find something else. So you never know.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I've heard stories like that where people are, get displaced and they move along in whatever way that is and realize that where they were wasn't so bad, even though the economic conditions didn't warrant them staying in it for whatever period of time, or they got laid off or downsized or reorged or whatever it might mean. What was your input related to their process? For instance, Alex spoke about somebody that came in to see him, who was in her early 60s, had just gone through chemo, and he gave her his honest, forthright, "Hey, I don't think you should be working. You should retire." 2 hours later, she called him back and said, "Thank you for that meeting. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me," because she had this in the back of her mind that she had to be working, but her health wasn't ready for it yet. So you had to enable or prompt these folks to make those pivots either into something new or back to what they already knew, and your role in that and how you went about it. And that's, I think, what is going to be valuable for those who are listening.
There were several things that I did. One was get their documentation in good shape, because they had been in the company for a long time, hadn't written a resume for quite a while, so they needed some work with getting a resume into the format that's good for today. So that was one of the things, getting their documentation in order. And I think another thing that I'm not sure how many times it's been discussed during the day today, but the mental side of job search, I think, is really important and something that people don't think about a lot. So that's something where I feel like I bring a lot to the table. I got them thinking positively, thinking in that kind of mindset about, what do I bring to the table? What have my accomplishments been? A lot of times people write a resume, it's not accomplishment oriented, it's just more task oriented. So I got them thinking more about the accomplishments. And also, just one thing, that a career coach can, one of the things, amongst others, that a career coach can bring to the table is just being a support for you. You can get that through job search buddies and things as well too, but that you need support when you're going through a job search. And I think that career coaches give a lot of that. I mean, I think Alex was saying, and probably others were saying throughout the day, career coaches ask a lot of questions, so they don't necessarily give you advice and say, this is what you should be doing, but they're there to support you and to let you know. Sometimes you don't realize how good you are, how much you bring to the table. You sort of take things for granted. And so a career coach can kind of decipher what you've done and explain it back to you in a way that, makes you feel really good about what you bring to the table. So I think that's one of the key things that I did with those clients, as well as my other clients, that I let them realize their value and appreciate it, and also feel good and confident about it going into the interviews.
Well, as you're saying this, I come from the same perspective, that I'm not going to tell clients the answers or tell them what they should or shouldn't do unless they tell me they're going to rob a bank, and then I'll advise against that. And it really comes down to their decisions are their decisions. And I've had clients who have gone from very high paying, high stress positions to something where they could just manage their life in a much more ease and flow way. And that's what they needed for a couple of years. And in one case, a client over in Long Island who kind of got, quote unquote, back into the rat race because she was getting bored with the job she could go to and didn't have to stay till midnight. Is one of those things. And similar to the hospitality industry, folks, if you love it and it's part of you, then hey, by all means do it.
Yeah.
So, I'll put it out there. Any questions from those who are watching or listening for Alan? And I got one more question that I've asked several of the panel members here earlier today. Recommendations on how to go through this process successfully toward retirement. You with a financial background and all this other kind of stuff, and you mentioned that, that's a holistic piece of it. But have you worked with those who are either approaching, considering, or manifesting retirement?
Yeah, I have. And, I think I could use myself as an example too, to really think about plan for your retirement. Alex was saying that earlier as well too. People, will put more time and effort into planning a 1 or 2 week vacation than they
Yeah.
will a retirement that could
Yep.
last 30 years or more. So I took a great course that was called Wise Aging. And the idea is to think about that, last third period of time of your life, and give it a lot of thought, before you just. Most people just think about, well, I got 2 more years to retirement, I got 5 more years to retirement, I'm going to retire at 62, I'm going to retire at 65, but they don't really have the same type of plan for their retirement. So one of the things I mentioned to clients is to think about that too, that you really want to plan for that. And it's great on the one hand that you don't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or have to deal with a difficult boss, but what are you going to do with your time?
Right.
You're only going to probably take so many vacations, and you have a big chunk of time. So what do you want to do, with this period of time? You could be working as a consultant, working part-time. You can do volunteer work. You can just get into all different types of hobbies. So I think it's really key. And I would say this too, to know what your financial situation is. If you don't have a financial plan, or talk to somebody and say, like, what do you really need to do in order to have the lifestyle that you want? So I think it's
Right.
very important to talk to somebody who knows finances, who can give you a projection of how long your resources are going to last for. So that gives you an idea. Do I need to work? How much do I need to work? How long do I need to work for? And that'll give you a much better time frame as to what to do. And part of my process too, and I have a financial planner who I talk to, on a regular basis, was like, what do I need to do versus what do I want to do?
Right.
So when I got an idea of what I needed to do, then that kind of framed what were some of my options. So I think it's the advice I give to people is to really, think about it ahead of time, and really come up with a strategy of what's going to work and what you're going to do. I mean, I have friends, I'm at the age now where, peers and friends are retiring now. And I
Same
talk
here.
to them.
Yeah.
And I ask them, so what are you doing? Well, I'm just relaxing. I get up late and, I don't have that much to do and this and that. And, that, like Alex was saying, with those different stages of life,
Right.
that might work for a little while, but you're going to get bored at a certain point. So what gets you up in the morning? What do you do that you look forward to? And, it could be all variety of different things. And I know other people that are retired that seem to be busier than when they were working. So
Yes.
it just varies. I mean, it's really what your needs are for one, but I think the planning aspect of it is really important and not something that people do as much as they really need to in order to be successful at it.
And the busy part comes in, especially when grandkids, pickleball, or golf are involved. That's been my
Right.
experience. And
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends who've retired who are never going to get better than, like, say, a 23 handicap, and they think they will now that they're retired. It's like, well, you're just not good, dude. It's not, practicing the way you swing is not going to help you.
Right.
But your point is entirely valid. What's going to get you up in the morning? Why are you focused on something? And grandkids can provide that, as can other hobbies, nonprofit activities, or even philanthropic related activities as well, which would obviously fall in under nonprofit in a lot of cases. So any other thoughts, perspective here? We're getting close to wrap up time. Any other thoughts that you want to wrap it up with? And I'm waiting for some questions from those in the audience. Haven't seen any yet, but if there are, then we'll certainly put them out there. But again, you've been working on this, or working with this, from a process standpoint for a number of years now, and worked with many clients. Just put a bow around the kind of results, not so much that you have created, and I know you have, but a bow around how those who are watching, can best navigate through this process?
The best way to navigate, I would say, is do your research, spend
Mhm.
time thinking about what you want to do and look into all the avenues that are possible to get information. And, this is a big part, in my opinion, of networking. It's not just looking for a job. You can network to learn more about careers. You can network to learn more, to get recommendations for doctors or other things too. So get information, gather information, and when you need help, seek out the help too. And that could be job seekers groups, it could be career coaches. Your family can be helpful to a certain extent and supportive, but they're not necessarily always the best when it comes to job search. So
I hear
a
that.
job search buddy or a
Right.
career coach or a job seekers group, those are all places that I think that are much more beneficial, to leaning on them as opposed to trying to do it with your immediate family, because they have a personal stake in things too. So their advice may come, from a different perspective than somebody that's a little more impartial, that has less at stake with the decision that you make.
Well, there's another thing that goes along with that is there's often other relationship related either baggage or expectations that don't serve the job search process well. When I'm coaching significant others or spouses of clients, I basically say, look, he or she is working with me to provide all the tools, the mindset, and the activities and the schedule that are going to be way more likely that they'll land the position that they're qualified for. If there are questions that you have of me or you have of what the process is all about, reach out to me. And your role in this case, whether you like it or not, is support. Because there have been numerous situations that I've run into where you get the nagging spouse. Well, how come you can't find a job? What's the, hey, and that doesn't help anything. That doesn't help
Right.
anything at all. In fact, it's really, really counterproductive. Now, if somebody's sitting around all day, drinking Sam Adams, that's another story. But if there's a
Right.
legitimate effort toward the job search, it's going to happen. It may not be in the time frame that was originally set out or before severance ends, but it will happen. And it's again providing the tools, the mindset, and the scheduling of different activities that will get the person back on their feet again sooner rather than later. So that's it. So Alan, I just want to say thanks for taking the time today to participate in this panel discussion. Although it was one-on-one all day, it's been a great panel, and you're certainly part of that.
Thank you.
Glad that we have had the chance to have this conversation, because there are a lot of things that I learned about you in this that I didn't know before, and couldn't exactly read from your resume or LinkedIn profile, but now I get the context of them, and it certainly makes a lot of sense.
Okay, and I'm going to put my information in the chat in case anybody wants to
Absolutely,
connect with
yeah,
me on
please do
LinkedIn or
that.
get in touch with me.
Please do that. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention again that all of the links to the recordings today are available, as well as a copy of my ebook, Finding God's True Purpose for Your Career, and a 30-minute consultation. And you can find all that. And I think that I will have the link resolved here shortly, but it should be in where you signed up to register for this. And after you register, there's a whole separate page at the bottom of that. You can click onto the VIP package. And if that's something that's of interest to you, you can click in there and we will go from there. So again, Alan, thanks. I'm going to stop the recording, but leave the lines open. I'm going to unmute everybody. So if there's some dialogue that needs to go around between now and the top of the hour with my next guest, then that can certainly occur.